Today I would like to talk about testing HTTP applications when developing using functional Scala. So there are a lot of benefits that come out of coding in a functional way, Scala applications. One of the benefits is that a lot of things that otherwise would be a complicated system to deal with just becomes a function. So let's look at an HTTP application. This is in Zio. I wrote this application in Zio, and I just want to show you guys how these things work. I don't know if you're familiar with Zio or CATS, then you know what I'm going to be talking about here. Is that you typically have a routes file. Same thing in Akka also, but especially in Zio and CATS, you have a routes file, but you have all the routes definitions. So if you want to do an integration test, and this is just kind of just what I wanted to talk about, if you just wanted to do an integration test that tests almost the entire application, but without the complicated, messy parts, which is the HTTP server, then you can very easily write a test to just the routes file. So, for example, I've written these tests which basically just reference the routes file, calls it as a function. So I pass in, I inject the parameters that I need to inject, the services and so on. And then I simply, I call it as a function, and I check the return value. So the nice part about about this is that if you do this to the routes file, then and you have the database running, and your database is, if you have an in-memory database to test with, which I do. In my case, what I did was I set up HSQLDB, an in-memory version of it. Then what you have is you have a setup where you can exercise like 80-90% of your code without doing the time-consuming, complicated, and also unnecessary part of dealing with a web server and setting it up and tearing it down for the test, and all of that work. It just goes away because your routes file just becomes a function call, and if you don't mock up the backend, your calls go all the way to the database, right? Like in my case, the calls first they go to my account service, for which I have this trait and an implementation. And so your typical architecture, you have a routes file, a web server, right? And that what that looks like is, this is my web server. So the way you do this both in CATS and Zio is that you have a routes file which sets up the routes, and then you create a web server using that routes file, but the web server doesn't really know anything. It's just a couple of lines. This is what I'm avoiding, but this is what's saving me a lot of time, because the entire thing just becomes a function call. And then I just simply call the routes directly as a function call, which looks like this, right? That's all. But everything else stays the same. So you're testing everything else, and then this goes through my my service, which is account service. This is a demo application for banking application. This is just a very simple application, but it demonstrates an entire app and how it would be structured. It's very much like a production application would look like. So this is my middleware service, which is which does the business logic, and then this goes to the database, and here I'm getting the connection, and the connection is just getting the connection from a HSQLDB, the in-memory version. So this is basically the nice thing about this is, again, that I can test most of my application, and the entire code is exercised. A lot of developers like to write unit tests for the PCs over integration tests, But using an approach like this, you have the advantage of testing the entire flow, or almost the entire flow, and it's really simple to do. So that's all I wanted to say today. I recommend using these functional libraries for HTTP related development, both in ZIO and CATS, depending on which you like more. They're very comparable. I could have shown you the same exact thing in CATS. It looks identical. It's just the same type of thing. And again, you can simply write a test by calling this function as a route. So thank you for listening. Talk to you guys the next time. Bye-bye.